Hey folks, welcome to the channel, The Agnostic Philosopher. I'm Don. I'm agnostic. Those of you who followed the channel know that much, and philosophically oriented. So I don't mind hearing ridiculous arguments. I don't necessarily enjoy them. I don't embrace them, but I look at them. I'll consider any lines of thinking because you can learn something, not necessarily that's true. Well, yeah, you could. I mean, even when you hear that there's an argument being made by a person or a group of people and the argument itself seems ridiculous, at least it's an anthropological or cultural or sociological or psychological study or observation that how do people come to believe such absurd things? And hardcore atheists think that about religionists. Religionists think that about the hardcore atheists, if you will. But I'm open minded. Most philosophers can consider just about anything and not be especially moved or emotionally oriented. Some of it's just comical. This, though, caught my attention. YouTube recommended it to me. I'm like, oh, I like the title of that. Let's see where it goes. Why intelligent people are leaving religion. So I guess we have a another circular argument here. I'm just going to guess because when you say intelligent people are leaving religion, you say, well, why are they leaving religion? Because they're intelligent. How do you know they're intelligent? Because they're leaving religion. That is one way in which the circularity can be framed. I don't know, though, if this argument or whoever's making this case is going to introduce a third, fourth, or fifth term that makes the argument either valid or sound.
Hey everyone, welcome to the open question. They say belief gives comfort, that it fills a hole. But what happens when the mind starts asking questions the answers can't satisfy? That's what's quietly happening all over the world. Not with rage, not with rebellion, but with quiet reasoning. Slowly, silently, people who once clung tightly to religion are letting go. And the ones who are doing it most are often the ones who think the most. The connection between intelligence and walking away from religion.
How do you justify that? These are the ones who are thinking the most. No, what that argument actually, what is being said is those who are thinking like I do are thinking the most, because I can say that as a former fundamentalist, I was thinking all the time. I was just thinking very different things. I was very biblically oriented. And then once I rewrote the New Testament in my own words, and I'd seen that my own assumptions about the origin of those texts, I thought that God was dictating it to people, the words to people, and that's why there was really only one author to it. And then I had seen that no, the people repeatedly, the writers of these canonized letters that were voted into the texts, which is an odd way of proving truth, that they wrote it. They said, I'm giving you my opinion, repeatedly said, I'm giving you my opinion. I'm giving you my thoughts. I'm giving you my judgment. So, and that changed the whole narrative when you see that people wrote it. That doesn't mean it's false. Somebody could give their account of the civil rights movement of the 60s or the Apollo 13 program, and it could be true. So just because people write it, but it changed the entire narrative in the way I viewed it. But I was just thinking things that others, maybe atheists certainly, or even agnostics, would absolutely disagree with. Fair enough. But the idea that thinking people or intelligent people, however you define intelligence, are those who quietly assessed the value of religion and left it, that's a bit specious, shall we say.
Religion isn't about arrogance. It's not about being too smart for faith. That's a lazy interpretation. What's really happening is something far more subtle and powerful. It starts with doubt. Not doubt as rebellion, but doubt as curiosity.
True.
As questioning. As trying to understand something that keeps slipping through your fingers the more you look at it. Studies have shown a consistent pattern. People with higher education levels, higher cognitive ability scores, and more analytical thinking styles are statistically more likely to be non-religious. That doesn't mean they're better people. It means they're less willing to accept explanations that don't add up.
All right, but then you're basically making the trust in the educational system that's the infallible way of looking at it, and it just means that your psyche has been imprinted with that being the preferred way of accessing what you call truth or assessing relevant information, and that is no different than those who espouse the biblical texts, for example, as dispositive. Because what you're saying here, the basis of why these thinking people get to the point of being unreligious or anti-religious um, is a product of this other school of thinking. It's no different than those who become theists because they go to a certain school. They may go to Catholic school, for example, or some other school or academic endeavor, or depending on the culture or country in which you grow, that what you're being exposed to is going to imprint on you. And then you're either swimming upstream against it or you're swimming with the tide, if you will, or with the current.
They're less satisfied with answers that ask them to stop thinking. When children grow up being told not to question, not to doubt, not to reason, something inside starts to feel unnatural.
True.
Curiosity is part of being human. It's the reason we've discovered galaxies, decoded DNA, and split
Uh-huh.
the atom. But when religion tells people not to look too closely, not to wonder too loudly, not to ask why something happened, only to accept that it's the will of some invisible force, those with a strong drive to understand start to feel like they're shrinking in a space that can't hold their mind
True.
anymore.
That's very true.
It doesn't happen overnight. People don't usually abandon religion because of a single moment. It happens like peeling paint. Slowly.
On the flip side, people tend not to go to religion based on a single moment. There's always some question that's going on, like there's got to be something more to this, or how do we look at the creation of matter? Where did the matter in the universe come from? That's a question of logic. That's a question of pattern recognition. That's a question of how we process information. We say, well, something just couldn't come ex nihilo, out of nothing. It's an equally valid counter argument to say, well, if God always existed, so to speak, if your argument is that matter couldn't have always existed because God had to bring it into existence, well, then where did God come from? And then if I turn around and say, well, God just always existed, it's equally valid to say, if you could posit that this being, this energetic being that you call God, always existed, it's equally plausible to say the matter in the universe, which is made of energy, also always existed. And you can't refute that. Not well, I don't know what the arguments would be for refuting it, but it works both ways.
A crack here, a flake there. A contradiction in a sermon. A story that doesn't match reality. A prayer that goes unanswered despite the desperation.
Yeah.
Or worse, answered in a way that makes no sense, while others suffer more and more.
True.
The most intelligent people don't leave because they hate religion. They leave because it no longer fits what they've come to understand about the world.
That's true.
They've studied physics, biology, neuroscience. They've read history, not just the versions written in temples or sacred books, but the raw, ugly, complex versions.
No, not only that. No, that's not even true. I mean, that's true for some people, certainly, that the studies have led them to it. But actually, I think more people are driven from religion by that very thing he said, that how do you account for suffering? If there's an all-powerful God who's all-loving and paying attention, why is there so much suffering in the world still? And that, I think, has driven more people. I think that idea that God is all powerful, all knowing, and a loving God who's paying attention and knows every hair in your head, yet lets your child die or sickness, and everybody on planet Earth generally goes through a painful process, whether it's a split moment of being hit by a bus or a long drawn out cancer battle, then that more than the educational system, so to speak, the scientific studies has driven more people from religion. That one premise, that, well, it's basically two attributes, these things attributed to God, that he's all powerful and loving, and yet there's unimaginable suffering. North Korea, the labor camps, poverty in Newark, New Jersey, wherever you want to go with it.
They've looked at how beliefs were shaped, not from revelation, but from power, control, and fear. And once you
Partly.
see how the machine works, it's hard to keep pretending it's magic. In a study published in the journal Personality and Social Psychology Review, researchers analyzed 63 studies across decades and found a significant negative relationship between intelligence and religiosity. In simple terms, the more analytical a person tends to be, the less likely they are to hold religious beliefs. This isn't because intelligent people want to disprove anything. It's because their mind is constantly connecting dots.
That's
And
true.
many of religion's dots just don't connect without mental gymnastics. Religion often depends on emotions. It thrives in fear, in guilt, in the hope for reward and the terror of punishment.
That's
But
true.
intelligence thrives on structure, on logic, on consistent principles. When one side says this is always true except when it isn't, and the exceptions feel suspiciously like convenience, something feels off. Take morality, for
does.
example. A lot of people are taught that without religion there is no right or wrong. But intelligent people see through that. They understand that morality isn't handed down. It evolves. It develops. Societies learn
Yeah.
over time what leads to less
Cooperation.
suffering, more cooperation, and greater well-being. Morality based on empathy and reasoning is often more consistent than one based on ancient rules that condone slavery, violence, or discrimination, as long as it's done in the name of faith. The more educated people become, the more they notice something else: the geographical lottery of belief. A child born in Riyadh is most likely to believe in one God. A child born in Utah, another. A child
Yeah.
born in a small tribal village might worship the river or the sun. The beliefs people die for are often just the beliefs they were born into. That
True.
realization alone shakes the ground for anyone who values truth over tradition. Then there's the silence. The silence after prayers. The silence after tragedy. The silence when answers are needed most, but none come. People who think deeply begin to notice how religion has always been there to fill the silence, but never to explain it.
All right, I'm going to stop this thing there. I get I have an aversion to adverting to what people believe. People say this, scientists say that, these people say that. That's a fallacious way of making an argument. It's a logical fallacy, actually. It's called an appeal to authority, or you could call it your appeal to your favored people, however you want to word it. An argument really doesn't need to stand on its own merits. But I understand that what he's saying here, because one, I lived a fair amount of this, and I am agnostic. But you've got to make a good argument, no matter what your position is. Even if somebody is coming to the conclusion that you believe is the right conclusion, you still have to call people out on it if they got there in an idiotic way, or a less than ideal way, or a way that is prone to attack. And so you want to have a strong argument, and then you want to be able to make it comfortably without being overly emotional or dramatic about it or angry about it or what have you. But it is true. I mean, curious people will continue to look, and look. And I know from having been a fundamentalist, I still remember one question I asked a gentleman, and I was a very bright guy who was part of this group too. And I mean, very bright guy, scientist, had his doctorate. He worked for a company, and the company had tens of thousands of people, and he was honored one year as their top scientist. He was working on toothpaste products and tooth decay and all this stuff, and very bright guy in the scientific realm, but also extraordinarily religious and devoted to this one group. And this was when I was just out of college and had become like a devoted Christian, if you will. And I remember asking a given question about a particular interpretation of a verse. And he just looked at me and said, "I can't believe you would ask that question after the way you've been taught." And I was stunned because I wasn't making a point. I was legitimately just asking a question, but it was like, oh, I see how it works. Curiosity, exploring that there might be a different meaning of that word based on how it was used back in the culture back in the day, and all these oh, that's off the table. If you're told a certain thing by the grand leader, that's all you need to know. Put that in your brain and you stop thinking about it from that point forward. And I was like, fuck that. That's not my way. So I eventually left the group. It was oppressive. And I wasn't angry at them. It just wasn't my way of thinking. And so his point here that you really just you take it on faith, which is another way of saying just believe it. Trinitarian dogma is one of those things. You just have to believe it. You can't understand it. You just have to believe it. Or the dual nature of Christ. He's both fully God and fully man. Yet you're never told in the text when to apply which part he's speaking as. Is he speaking as God here or as man here? Which is it? Because they're different attributes of what we consider to be man and what we consider to be God. So anytime you begin to ask questions, it does begin to unravel certain things. And that's where epistemology is very valuable to understand not what the limits of human understanding are and what we consider knowledge, but that there are limits. So just sort of be mindful that we don't know everything, which is why I say I'm agnostic. I don't believe that there's a God because the texts say it. I believe it makes more sense to me that everything that we see in the universe came from somewhere and that would have been some independent, powerful agent, which we might call God or a creator. But that may be absolutely wrong. The matter in the universe might have always been here. Mankind evolved over time and our creative brain just made this idea of some afterlife up, an ability, if you will, that animals and trees and insects don't seemingly have. We're the ones gifted with going off the reservation. So be it. Maybe that is the case. But I mean, it's food for thought. But the continual references that he made in here, the frequent references to these people think this way, therefore it's better. And it's like, no, you might be guilty of the same thing. Just like people looked at the biblical texts and said, we read these every day. We say the Lord's Prayer. We study them, because this is our basis of how we come up with what to believe. Now you're saying the academic institutions are the basis of what we come to believe. And over time, this experiment might prove to be failed, just the way people consider the adherence to the biblical text as a failed experiment. So we're going to find out. So, all right, guys, hope you enjoyed that. I may do the rest of this video at some point, but I'm going to get on with some other ones now. Have a great day. I'll see you on another video and keep thinking philosophically.